When the thoughts are calmly collected and the imagination is properly directed, the dots are easily connected.
It's tough to really be up to date to the degree that I just read in your bio wow, dude, you've been busy. And
I've been busy, man. I've been
yeah,
busy. Yeah.
and not the
I
kind of
mean,
busy
it's
of preoccupation. Busy you have been producing content.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're in these awakening times, man. There's just so much to do. It's like that's the problem sometimes, it's just to rest and rejuvenate,
Oh
which I've
God,
been
man.
learning a lot more of in the last few years, and traveling's
Yes.
afforded me that as well.
Mm. It's the Sabbath, right? Whether it's the Saturday or the Sunday, at least one day we must choose. Even the Essenes, right? They're very, very big on this. We have to choose a day
Mm,
to just rejuvenate, rest, reflect, appreciate, and that has to be done daily, even as well. That's what meditative practices are about.
100%.
Yeah.
100%, man. And to really just be in that connection to the divine, like I had a day actually today where I've just I just couldn't get much work done, and I'm like, God, it's Sunday, man. I should just actually be rejuvenating.
Yeah.
And I just watched a little documentary on Gnostic wisdom because we're both into that esoteric
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
and it just reminded me, like we're in such a, struggle. There's an intense intensity to existence at any age, like people like to say, of course, our age is the most intense. Who knows? But just being in existence, being in this mortal body, being in the illusion of the
Yes.
simulation, and
Yes.
it takes that maintenance every day, as you
Maintenance.
mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, just to maintain that, because we forget. It's so easy to just go into unconsciousness and be stuck in the worldliness of our lives. We do
Totally.
have to act in the world,
Sure.
but we need to, and that's why, when you said Sabbath, that really it's like a gong going off inside of me to
Hmm.
yeah, spend maybe one day a week really in that practice. I used to do that a lot more, and maybe that's a good reminder.
Totally, totally, man. I looked at your chart, Darren, and I remember
Oh
your
shit.
Gemini. I remember that clearly because it's the easiest aspect to remember one's sun. But when I started going deeper in astrology and I learned about different aspects and stuff, it made a lot more sense that even for me, for example, I'm a Leo, but my moon's in Scorpio, which makes me a very different kind of Leo. But
Mm,
with you, you're a Gemini, and then you have both. I thought you were moon in Scorpio for some reason. I don't know, but you're right. You're moon in Aries. You clarified that, and you're
mm.
also rising ascendant Aries, which is, bro, that's a lot of Aryan energy. You're almost more Aries than your
Whoa.
Gemini, bro.
Am I rising Aries? I always thought it was Taurus.
Your ascendant, that says it might be really close. Depends on the degree. Let me take another look
Damn.
here.
That would
It
be
says
nice.
Aries technically, but I think it is. I'll bring it up. I don't have it here real.
Okay, okay.
But
But yeah, I
that
feel the Aries in a big way with the moon, especially. Yeah, there's been this drive, this warrior energy that comes out every now and
warrior,
again.
that's what it is. The warrior. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, that's been a journey to unfold. Obviously we both know we're in a culture that's trying to stifle the warrior in men, keep the
Absolutely.
masculine really distorted.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
warrior energy has been a journey for me.
Yep, absolutely, man. And but it's your past life. It's what you've been. You've been there, done that.
Mm,
I didn't look at
mm,
yourself. No, your North Node's Virgo, so then your South Node's Pisces. So this idea of you coming in and being such a magician and such a big picture understanding and returning to Gnostic wisdom as the tool to dissolve this illusion, this Maya and simulation makes so much sense. And the warrior energy you have perhaps is why you are so good at holding the kinds of spaces where I got to meet you in, where it's
mm,
like Aryan energy is like the communal leader, very, very
mm,
good. Leo's more political, like big public stage kind of thing. Aries is like
mm,
small communities and many of
mm,
them. And here's what you're
mm,
doing. This is your work. So let's talk a little
mm.
bit about your work, man. Even just the whole
Sure.
the archetypes that you did the 6 week online class. Good friend of mine and brother, soul brother, we had him on the podcast. Len did that. He was
Oh,
participated in
nice.
that, and I got the secondhand clarity and empowerment, just seeing the brother. Tell us a little bit about that. When did you start doing that?
Yeah, it's very fortuitous how it came to me. I was in India in 2012 with my friend Meg Marie Gates, who I was doing that concert with, and I was on a bit of a pilgrimage. My father had died the year before. he left
Oh,
me a
wow.
small inheritance, and I decided, I just really want to go to India. Actually, Megan Marie really like actually catalyzed that trip. She wanted to go to Oroville, this beautiful eco village there. Anyways, we ended up spending 2 months wandering around Tamil Nadu, and it was my first time in India. I'd always been obsessed with Eastern mysticism, so it was just blowing my mind.
Mm,
And
mm.
just one day, we're up in the mountains of Kodai Canal, and we had just met, as you do, like fellow travelers on the road. And we had met this really wonderful Portuguese guy called Duarte. And one day we were just walking, and he just said to me, "Hey, man, have you ever worked on your masculinity?" And it was kind of a curious question to me at the time because my conditioning at that moment was like, men, we really need to work on our feminine. We really need to open up, be
Right,
more sensitive.
right.
And I kind of looked at him curiously. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, there's this book, and he mentioned King War Magician Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. And he said,
Yes,
this
yes.
book, and this is interesting, the context. He said, this book was given to me, he said, by a group of wise European witches, like older elder women. And they
Wow.
said to him, every man needs the technology. They described it as a technology of this
Yes,
book in their life.
yes.
And, it felt like a powerful moment. I went back to Toronto, I got the book, and, reading about archetypal psychology, because the archetypes are basically like the character grids, the design of human consciousness on an essential level. I like to use the idea of when you put a laser through a quartz crystal and that refracts into all the colors of the rainbow. It's sort of like
Yes.
that. Like the divine moves through human consciousness and then refracts into many different categories. But
Yep.
for Carl Jung, he had these four archetypes for the masculine: king, war, magician, lover.
Lover.
And it was like finding that one food or mineral in my diet that I've been missing. The minute I
I love
started
that
reading it,
metaphor.
I felt
Yeah,
this
yeah.
strengthening. Like I just
Yes,
felt alive, man. And like when you
yes.
work with the archetypes, because they're pointing you to the fullness of the archetype, which is them in their highest expression, but then they also point to the shadow, which is this
Yes.
bipolar pendulum of like
Bipolar pendulum.
excessive.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're
Yes.
all dealing with that. Shadow work is so
Absolutely.
popular nowadays for good reason. So it
Absolutely.
really starts to work on you, just the knowledge itself, because it's shining this light into your unconscious where your shadow patterns are, and then it's also inspiring you where you want to be vying towards.
Totally, man.
And man, it
That's
started to
shining the light.
just
When you mention that, there's a rhyme I always, when I'm freestyling, all there's a little rhymelet. It's shining
Mhm.
the bright white light through the prism, escaping the psychological prison. Because by
Ooh.
understanding the
Wow.
12 faculties of the human psyche, we are no
Mm,
longer bound to these. We're aware that they're how we express ourselves, and then we're aware of how they come as either detriment or obviously as an advantage. And it's a huge, huge thing, man. Like I'm thinking Dark Side of
mhm,
the Moon, even like Pink Floyd was on this tip. Anyone
mm,
who ever came into this knowledge was trying to pass it on and disseminate it. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about when you mentioned the bipolar pendulum swing, the not bi,
mhm,
but the pendulum swing. We know about bipolar, which is a
mm.
disease much like ADHD. I don't think it's a dis-ease. It's just a it's
Right.
an ability that if you don't learn like how to, as a surfer, which is what the alchemists essentially are, work with
Mhm,
these and ride them like literally waves, then it could
mhm.
become detrimental. However, here you are as a Gemini, and this is your sign now. This is your gift, is understanding, understanding, as I like to say, or
Mm.
overstanding the pendulum swing. You're not hanging from the thing being flung from Mars to Jupiter. You're standing on it, riding it. You're aware of its cycle because there's no balance. There's only a
Yeah.
flow. There's only a rhythm. And
Yeah,
there
yeah,
you
yeah,
are,
yeah.
Gemini. And I wanted to talk about like the whole sacred feminine and masculine because I feel when I look
Mm,
at the Geminis in the world who are really, I think, amazing proponents and leaders of this, like Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson, these are Gemini
the
energies.
Geminis. That's
Yes, that
interesting.
they're trying to teach us about polarity and how to embrace these
Mm,
inner two.
yeah.
And really the Aquarian age that we live in, the age of Aquarius that we're moving from, Pisces. Everyone talks about this dawning on the age of, right? That whole fifth
Yeah.
dimension. Aquarius is the sign that represents the equanimity of gender. And that's why we're seeing even the whole transgender agenda, as I call it, like
Interesting.
they're hijacking what they know. And that's what the elites do. There's a reason why the Illuminati symbol has an eye on the capstone, and that's a separate piece from the rest. Because in the
Yeah.
land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, and they're using this knowledge.
Mm,
They're hijacking, and they're kind of trying to keep it what is it called? The word when you
concealed.
concealed exactly,
Yeah.
and then that's why. guys like you and I, unfortunately, there's lots of us, brother, and I'm so happy to know that, you know, they're way more than I realized that are waking up and then also doing the work like you are, which is simplifying it, man, and
Mm,
disseminating it in a simple way.
absolutely, brother. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love all that wisdom you dropped. And the sacred masculine, the sacred feminine is like, that togethering. We are, we're witnessing, people bandy these words about, but there's a truth to the fact that we've been living in this kind of patriarchal system for thousands of years. I mean, the
Right.
Gnostics were trying to warn us, that this God that we find in a lot of Abrahamic religions was a false deity.
Mm.
And a lot of these monotheistic systems that focus on a male God and then painting women as like the fallen Eve, who's brought us
Yes.
into this fallen state. They,
Yes.
they, they put this like persecution on women.
Yes.
And we're now in this age where a lot of us are, waking up, our own eyes are waking up to the truth. And part of it is realizing that, there were a lot of ancient cultures beyond those Abrahamic religions where men and women were actually working together in very powerful co-creative forces.
Right.
I've been studying the Gnostic mystery schools really deep in the last decade. And even the figure of Magdalene, which to me was like, people talk about Jesus being a savior. Well, for me in my life, like finding Magdalene, the story of her, like was like
Mm.
salvation, because not
Right.
only did it humanize Jesus to know that he
Yes.
had like this beautiful romance with a woman, potentially had progeny, but it also invited
Progeny.
this
What is
whole
that?
look in
What does
like
that mean?
children, like
Oh,
children.
yeah, yeah, procreated. Okay.
Potentially, we don't know, right?
Potentially,
Like
right.
it's the theory,
But it
but
humanized them,
also,
like you said, it grounded more of
yeah,
this deity that's just constant idolized, and that's why even the Hebrews they don't even say his name. They just call him JC. They want, but like yeah, I get that, like because it's like idolization. We know it's the opposite of what we're supposed to learn in spirituality, which is that it's within. It's
hmm,
not something on the outside
totally,
to gawk over and be like, save me. You said something real
yeah,
quick. Sorry, man. I just want to like because for our
yeah,
audience,
yeah,
they
go,
may
go.
not know when you say Abrahamic religions. We're
Yeah.
talking about the Islam,
Judaism,
Judaism,
Christianity,
and
Islam,
Christianity.
basically the three
Yeah,
the three major religions that most of us know as
right.
the big empire religions on the planet.
Yes, they
And it's
rule
not
the
to like,
hex.
yeah, not to denigrate them. I mean, the thing is, we're all pulling from the same wisdom. It's all this
Yes,
universal ocean of consciousness. So, especially in the mystical branches, you'll find Gnostic Christianity, you'll find Kabbalah, you'll find Sufism. Those branches have all been persecuted by the actual
yep.
religion, like the
Yes,
more
yes,
fanatical components of it.
yes,
But the mystic sides of it, like if you read Rumi, if you look into Sufism, for example, you find this much more beautiful flavor of
yes,
spirituality
yes.
that is much more connected to that more universal, sense of religion. I mean, Hinduism,
Totally.
they used to say there was this age way back in the day, maybe the time of Atlantis, where there was like, they called it Sanatana Dharma, the age of universal religion, where we
Mm,
were all basically in the same flow, the same devotion, the same knowings, the same wisdom. And
right.
and I mean, you may be able to speak to this more about the Aquarian age, but I feel like that's kind of our destiny now as we move
Yes.
into this age to return to that.
And this is why your self node being in Pisces, it makes sense. You're coming here almost like of a memory. Pisces is the big picture. It's the whole ocean. It's mutable water, and thus it's the whole ocean. Opposite of Pisces is Virgo, which is the ability to. I say it's like almost like a zoom on your camera. Pisces zooming out to see the big picture. Virgo zooming in to see the detail, and thus
Nice.
compartmentalize and organize in order to most efficiently and effectively disseminate this otherwise mystic and it sounds hoopla, it sounds new age and all this, and there's nothing new about it. That's the funny thing. People talk about the new age. I'm like, bro, this is nothing
So
new.
true.
You know what I mean? Like even just like going back to the Abrahamic religions, you're talking about the
Mm,
patriarch and how being toxic in this time and era. It's true. It's like if we look at the cube of Mecca and we just open that up three-dimensionally, it's the cross of Christianity. What we're
mm,
talking about is six. The six is the six-pointed star in Judaism, right? The triangles pointing
mm,
upward and downward. Ultimately, they're all about how do we find this equanimity between polarity, between gender, which corresponds to polarity. And they're one. The funny thing is, we know as the Hermetic philosophy, which I believe is, I have found it to be the most logical understanding
mm, mhm.
of all esoteric and occult sciences, man. These seven principles, and then how Mark Passio also added the eighth, which is care. because if you don't care, then everything else doesn't
Who
matter.
added them? Who added the eight?
Mark Passio, yeah.
Oh,
Mark Passio,
okay.
he was one I was watching for a little while. He got a little bit too aggressive at one point. It's funny, it's not uncommon that a lot of these male, especially energy disseminators of this truth, reach this point where it's like that male ego does get involved and they get angry and they lose their center, and then they go from spiritual teacher to just like worse than the evangelistic preacher. Like it's like
Sure.
anger. And I can relate to that, bro. My moon's in
Yeah,
Scorpio.
yeah.
I get
Ooh,
angry when people don't take this shit serious. That
yeah.
there's not a coincidence. First of all, the word coincidence, to coincide, is referring to
Mm,
angles. And if you take L,
mm,
EL at the end of angle, we have angels. And it's not a
mm,
coincidence why there's exactly the number of angels that there are, just like the six correspond to the 6 days of creation. Going back to the
mm,
beginning of this
mm,
conversation, we talked about the Sabbath, the seventh, on which we must take a moment to rest
mm,
and
mhm,
reflect and then repeat. And
mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
man, like I think it's just so,
Word.
this is I can see the big picture that you have as, because it's yourself, no, past life, and then Aries. It's almost like you were a warrior fighting
Mm.
to protect this magic. If we think of the magician
Yeah.
archetype, right, within the book, and then we have the warrior, then your Aryan energy was like the warrior that was trying to protect and uphold the boundaries to keep the sanctity of that Piscean big picture, so that it didn't become all compartmentalized, but it does because it's part of the cycle. And we can't
Yeah.
blame, you know what I mean, the fact that the sun has to go down, like there's nothing wrong about that. What the
Yeah.
wrong part is, like you said, when you create Eve, into the female, and now we call her evil,
Yeah.
and she rules the evening and all this darkness,
Mhm,
as if it's like, wait a second, at night in the dark is when we see the stars. So
mhm, mhm.
there's a reason why we've demonized.
That's why, for me, one of the spiritual like philosophies that's really become a huge part of my, path has been Tantra,
Talk
and
to us
more
about
like,
that, man. Yeah, I know that's
yeah,
become a
so like,
word I'm hearing.
yeah, I mean, Tantra gets really kind of not rendered in the right way in our culture because we have this sexual wound, right? And like,
Mm,
so there's a lot of gravitation towards, most people think Tantra just is about tantric sexuality,
right,
which,
right.
and one of the appeals of Tantra is Tantra just literally, it's a Sanskrit word that means to weave. And
To
to expand on
weave.
the definition, it means to weave with all experiences of reality as being a part of the oneness of existence, the one universal fabric of everything, to be
Right.
a part of truth. So, it is said that when we're in a kind of dark age, and we're in this kind of Kali Yuga,
Kali.
according to,
Yes.
yeah, and
Yes.
in Hindu time, we move through these four cycles, and they just repeat, but it's a spiral, right? So we get new octaves of each like time,
Octaves. Ooh, yeah.
and
You're
we're in the
dropping.
age of, yeah,
Bring it,
yeah,
brother. Bring it. I love it.
yeah, yeah. You too, man. I love it. So we're in this age of darkness, and the cool thing is, after the age of Kali Yuga comes the golden
The
age, and I
golden
mean,
age.
there's little different ideas. It could be still a long way away, or we could be right on the cusp. Who knows? But they say during this darkened age, the old traditional ways of spirituality don't really work as much because things have become so material, so dense. The ignorance is
Mm,
so strong.
mm.
And Tantra always thrives in this age because you kind of need a
Oh.
spirituality that's a little radical, that'll kind of shirk the traditions, that will
Mm.
kind of go into this really warped kind of simulation of reality that we're living in, this
Interesting.
matrix, and bring the holiness into every aspect of our being so that we can actually appreciate that, what, everything is a part of the universal aspect. Now, it doesn't mean we bypass it. It gets very complicated to be tantric. If you see like human or child trafficking, these very grievous crimes that are being exposed in our humanity, it doesn't mean that we just allow that. That's just part of the universal
No,
fabric.
no.
But what it does is Tantra says, I'm going to, instead of making this dualistic thing with all of reality, I'm going to bring that child trafficking experience close by and try and get a sense of why is this perpetration happening,
Right,
because
right.
knowledge is power. I mean, if we can get
Yes.
into an understanding that most of the problems on the planet are really distorted consciousness, then these
Mm,
perpetrators, for instance, of many egregious crimes are happening all over the world in many capacities.
right.
We can start to build that care that you mentioned as that eighth
Care.
hermetic
Yes.
principle,
Yes.
because truly, if we're going to move forward, and this is where it gets kind of out of people's worldview, because we still don't live in a world that's like established a true science of peace and love
Right.
and rehabilitation, although the plant medicine and psychedelic therapies are making a huge leap forward with that.
Sure,
But we
sure.
need to, in the tantric tradition, it's like everything is welcome into the realm of being understood as truth, and sexuality is just one of those big gaping wounds in our humanity. This
Yes.
division between men
Yes.
and women, this misuse of this creative force. So a
Totally.
lot of people have gravitated towards that, but Tantra really needs to be expanded to
Absolutely.
one's whole life,
When you mentioned weaving, that really resonated with me because I actually recently did a journey with Brother Len, one on one, because I've had
Mm,
major trauma with plant medicines in the past, and that's doing it
mm,
under the guidance of one of these neo self-proclaimed shamans. And this is the dangers right now in our
yeah,
times, and they were prophesized. Beware the false prophets who are there only for the
yes.
prophets. You know what I'm saying? And I had a really horrible experience. But just really quick, I finally found the courage, and a brother like Len, whom you know, like I really
Yeah.
felt like I was going to be held and protected because he's such a warrior. And
Mhm.
he took me through the 6 hours. It was at one point it was like yayadis in Greek is grandmothers. You're in Greece right now, right?
I am in Greece, bro. In Corfu. I'm looking at the Ionian Sea
Corfu.
right now.
Oh my God. That's special. That's
It's
special.
special.
So, you know what? As much as I wanted it to be an in studio interview, it's special that it happened while you're there looking at the, oh my God.
Oh man.
Perfect. But it
Yeah.
was yaya this. And if you say yaya on the street, it means grandmother or
Okay.
elder. Okay. And I saw these elders at one point. I was in this cathedral, kind of like behind me, the in 2 dimensions, but a three-dimensional cathedral, whereby the top was these yayades are all with like they would sit there always weaving. And they were all up there weaving. And then I zoomed in, kind of like with that focus of
Mm,
Virgo kind of thing, because that was the big picture. And then I zoomed in and I was able to see recognizable ancestors, you know? And then more so, what I saw they were weaving, bro, were the souls. And the souls that were being woven together are what we then called, for example, when yours and my path crossed, as synchronicity.
mm.
Recognizing now that we have to, they're designing this there, and I feel that's what's happening when we're dreaming, and why sleep is so important, because our soul is going there and checking back in, and like all of our souls are like trying to figure out how, when we wake up again on this planet in this simulation, they can get us together, because they know like the only reason why we're not as strong as we can be is because we are not united. You know, it
Yeah.
is in our division that they win. And then hence,
That's how we gotta weave, man. I mean,
yes,
on another
yes,
level, we gotta weave together too. And that's
yes,
where, again, like you look at what the elites are doing right now, it's like they've just set all these booby traps with,
yes,
all these divisions. They've got everyone playing identity politics and everyone's
yes,
claiming victimhood over this and that. And divide we conquer, it's like
totally,
it's
man.
such an old story. And
I know, I know.
I mean, and you had mentioned, the Hermetic principles being so logical. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, from my esoteric understanding, like our emotional intelligence is our more primal, older form of intelligence. And the
Yes.
rational thought is kind of a newer ability that humans have that we're still kind of learning,
A
and
newer
that's why when you look at,
technology, I think, is the
yeah,
word
when
you
you look
brought
at the,
back.
yeah,
You
when you
bring
look
it
at
back.
Greek
Technology.
philosophy,
You nailed it. And
yeah.
why these witches, maybe they called it specifically technology, because it's
Mm,
what is technology? We know right now technology is this tool that could be
yeah,
used or abused. Sorry,
yeah.
yeah, go on. This is amazing because this is also segueing into, we're talking about a lot of stuff that's in your book, Love's Revolution. And I just wanted
Yeah,
to make sure that I mentioned that as well for people that, stay
for
tuned for that. When
sure.
is that coming out, real quick?
It's out, man. It came
Oh,
out a
it's
year
out.
ago.
That was a
Yeah,
year
it's
ago.
out. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
get
I'm
me a
working on
copy.
a new one though. Yeah,
Okay,
dude. I think
okay.
you'd really like that book. So, I mean, speaking of like all the booby traps that have been set. So when I wrote that book, it's a collection of writing on sacred sexuality and conscious partnership, because I think all of us are dealing with the wounds, regarding sexuality and relationship. And those are,
Totally.
we're all in this like healing of the masculine, the feminine, and women and men. And one of the most powerful things we can do right now is be an intimate relationship, because that's
Yes,
like the crucible, man. That's where
yes,
you
yes.
are choosing to be seen like never before. And if you're in this like partnership where you're inspiring each other and lovingly pointing out each other's blind spots, you can like accelerate growth
Huge.
so much. So
Lovingly pointing
it's
out each other's blind spots. I love how you put that. Absolutely.
exactly. So the
Absolutely.
book is like a collection of writings that go back about 20 years, and there's
These are all your
poems,
own
there's
writings or
essays.
poems that you've
They're all
collected
my
from?
writings. They're all my writings. Yeah. So there's
Okay,
poems.
let me just say real quick plug here, bro. I'm a meticulous writer. I mean, I'm a rapper, and all my lyrics and verses are very, very intentional. Yours is of the few people that I follow in my news feed. Yours is one that, even though you write these freaking novels, I sit there and read every damn word. I love
Thank
your
you,
writing,
bro.
bro. Yeah, bro. Your writing
Thank
is
you.
legit. It brings
You know,
instant
man.
coherence to my mind. Like,
Oh,
oh, bro.
dude, that makes coming from you, who I see as a fellow wordsmith, and I see like the brilliance of your mind, your ability to synthesize ideas. Yeah, man, that means a lot. And I know it's so funny, dude. Sometimes I write these and it's so long-winded, and I'm just like I'm from another time. I feel like I'm this ancient soul, and
Yeah, bro. Yeah, you
I
are.
just made a
Hands
decision
down.
years ago that, I'll have shorter little things that I write here and there, but I just got to let it fly sometimes
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
it's also, and that's also like diffusing one of the big booby traps, which is like our attention is so whittled down that,
Attention, you said.
yeah, our
Attention.
attention, like
Yes.
attention
Yes.
deficit
Yes.
disorder, right? Like everything's about quick
Yes.
fixes. I mean,
Yes.
fuck me. I
Yes.
went on and off TikTok a few times. I could not last there. It felt like it was obliterating
Oh,
my
yeah.
attention
Yeah. I've
span.
been
It was
avoiding
fucking
TikTok. Talk about
terrifying.
booby traps. That's one I can
Oh,
see. I don't want to get
and a
sucked into.
literal booby trap there, like
Literal.
boobies
Yeah.
traps. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's the thing is we're
Clickbait.
just thrown, yeah, clickbait, all
Yeah.
this sexualized imagery. And
That's a
so
tool. You
for
know that. That's
me,
China's weapon, man. It was one of the greatest weapons they ever created was TikTok.
blatantly,
Yeah. I figure if I have to just like turn it off and jump back on, it's not a biggie, you know?
yeah, man, for sure.
Commercials
Love
on
the song, by the
Spotify,
way.
that's different. Oh, thanks, bro. You heard it? Yeah, the whole
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah, I love the ending where your daughter, well, congratulations, didn't know you had a kid.
Oh
And
no? Oh,
she's,
thanks,
no,
bro.
no.
Yeah.
And
Daughter, yeah, little daughter.
she's saying like she loves you like a billion million times.
One. Yeah, she made up her own
Yeah.
number, man. I love it. I love it. Her name is
That's
Athena, bro.
woo!
Right? That's
Yeah,
why.
man. Okay, okay.
Athena Trinity. Her middle name is Trinity. And
Wow.
Sophianos. My last name is Greek for philosopher, man. Gnostic wisdom.
Are you
Sophia.
serious? Your
Sophianos, yeah.
last name is Sofianos, dude.
Sophianos, yeah.
That is
So it's like
amazing, bro.
it's no coincidence at all. That's why my first episode on this podcast was Who Am I and Why Should You Care? And all I did was break down my astrology and my numerology. It's my name. Like it's literally the name I've been given. Nico, means victory. Nikolaos, the full name Nicholas, victory of them all, of the people. And I realized younger, the detriment side of the Leo in me was like being victorious over people versus recognizing now as
Mm,
a Spartan Greek that I am victory reflecting for the people
mm,
how victorious we are when we're together. And that's what we
yeah.
remember the Spartans
Word.
for. To me, I'm not big on like national pride. However, I
Yeah.
feel there's good pride and bad pride, and I do feel good pride about being Spartan Greek in the sense that
Hmm.
these 300 guys led by Leonidas
Hmm.
were so revered and they'll echo throughout
It's
eternity,
incredible, man. Yeah.
right?
I remember studying that way back in like grade fucking five
Really,
about the
eh?
300 Spartans. Oh yeah, or
Yeah.
six or whatever. And just being so enamored by that story. I mean the Greek stuff. I mean, I read the Odyssey in
You
high
did, eh?
school. Like, oh yeah. And I
That's
mean, I was
it's
a
by
huge
Homer.
fan of Socrates. Socrates had a huge influence on me. Um,
Absolutely. The most humble of them all. The one that we always
yeah,
attribute, right? The more I know, the less, the more I realize I know nothing.
yeah.
And
So
I
should
think,
we turn back into what we were talking about? The
yeah,
continuities.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I was sort of riffing about how, with like TikTok and all these things that are robbing people of their attention span, like I like to write, these longer pieces because, I don't want to, it's kind of like I'm standing my ground here. And I just feel that like, in all these bite-sized little like Instagram reels where everything's just on these time limits and stuff, like to really come to true knowledge, it doesn't change, you really need to like really unfold things. You really need to
Yes.
like sit and contemplate, make time. Everything's just become so hyper accelerated,
Yes.
and we all just seem to go along with it, because it's like we're all trying to market and like make
Mm-hmm.
our,
Mm-hmm.
ideas as viable and as like as popular as we can.
Yes.
But if you really like zoom out, in that Piscean way, it's like these elites that are running all these technologies, you wonder why they're putting all these like little compartments around these like
Exactly.
messages. So
Exactly.
for me, I like to write long-winded things, and moving into books like Love's Revolution, publishing the last year, it's definitely the opening of the floodgates. Like I'm working on another book here. But I want to mention in
Mm.
Love's Revolution, I think you'd love that book because the first story, because there's two short stories in the book that bookended actually. The first story is called The Rise of Eve, and it's a retelling of this Garden of
Ooh.
Eden story, because I feel this Garden of Eden
Ooh.
story was like, as we spoke about a bit earlier, that's when women were sort of, and the divine feminine was sort of criminalized.
Right. Right.
And then the snake, right? But according to
Yes.
the
Yes.
Gnostics, the snake was actually symbolic of, the light, the inner light, the wisdom of
Mm.
Sophia herself, Sophia.
Yes. Yes.
And, the snake was trying to actually lead us into eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil because it's our birthright to be enlightened, to know
Ah.
that, to be able to discern those. Whereas
Yes.
Yahweh,
Yes.
Jehovah, who's this false deity who had sort of imprisoned us in this kind of garden of earthly delights, was trying to keep us in ignorance, because
Yes.
that's knowledge is power, and the best way to rule over humanity is to keep us ignorant of where we are really from, what are our real abilities and stuff like that.
Origins. Yes.
So I kind
Yes.
of reverse that in this opening story. So Eve,
Amazing.
goes on this mission. She eats the fruit. She gets enlightened. She actually learns some amazing stuff about sacred sexuality. And then she goes back and she teaches Adam. It also
Right.
showed that women are teachers as well. And we need to make space for a lot more of those like divine feminine voices right now in our
Totally.
world.
Totally. And I believe that's part of why I had a daughter. My brother as well. We both had daughters. In our
Hmm.
family, it's interesting because there's two boys and two girls. It's like a yin yang. Even like all the
Powerful.
females are female signs, water and earth, and then we have all the males are like fire and air. It's crazy. And this is
Hmm.
where I mean, like, I only studied astrology to this degree, to the point of even obsession. And I can admit, and I see when people are
Yeah.
still going through it, where you're like, everyone, you want to know their sign and shit. It's like, thank God I kind of went past it, and I still have to check myself. Like sometimes people be like, "Yo, Nico, man, can you just say that all over again, but not like making any goddamn astrological reference, please?" Like it gets
Yeah.
tiring, you know.
I feel a
But
lot of people get astrology like that.
oh man, it is a stage. You have to go through that phase, but that's also why as a Gnostic that you must be initiated. Like it's
Mm.
very
Mhm.
important. You don't in Fit Hop, my program that I do in schools for
Mm.
kids. I'm
Mhm.
like rule
Mhm.
number 7: never skip a lesson. Like it doesn't matter if you're smart
Mm.
enough for grade 8. There's things socially that you need to learn about in grade 6 and 7. So same
Absolutely.
idea, right? As a Gnostic or as because knowledge is power, but like they say,
Yes.
absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Yeah.
100%. And you have to have that, like one Gnostic teacher I followed many years back, Samuel Ovar. He's like this Colombian Gnostic. I never met a person. I just read his writings because I think he passed away in the 80s. But he always talked about how you have to have this balance between knowing and being, and
Mm,
being is all those spiritual practices of embodiment, of being in the
yes.
world, of like,
Yes.
and I think nowadays with these phones and like the fact, I mean, it's amazing. Spirituality has become mainstream in a lot of ways, but this awakening is happening within a capitalist system and within a psychological matrix where, especially with social media, a lot of people are skipping steps,
Yes.
because all of a
Yes.
sudden, I mean, just think about the responsibility we all have. All of a sudden, everyone is their own media channel.
That's right.
Everyone has their own platform. Everyone has the ability to disseminate ideas, to influence people.
Yes.
And that
That's a big one.
in
Influence
dude, it's
people.
huge. It's huge because back in the day, the true guides, the true wisdom teachers, the true teachers would be these adepts who had to go through all these initiations so that they could
Initiations.
be appropriate channels for wisdom. It
Exactly.
was built on a
Exactly.
lot of reverence, a lot of respect, and there was always an elder system in place as well, where you had these people who were well refined in front of you, who could be unbiased discerners, to
Yes.
really say, okay, you've arrived at the next lesson, and to kind of
Right.
manage you in a certain way.
Right.
And I know there's all this like new ageism. Well, we live in this new age, this new earth where like there's no longer any gurus and we're all gurus and stuff. And it's like, I don't know, a bit of that is a bit like a half truth, I think.
I agree.
And
I
I think
agree.
we're getting into trouble. I mean, you mentioned like a kind of fake shaman that you had worked with. I mean, I've seen loads of this stuff. I've had interactions with loads of this stuff. I early in my journey fell through the same traps, because we're all awakening in this clumsy time. I'm not trying to point fingers or anything.
Clumsy time. Yeah,
It's just
literally.
more like a word of caution,
Yes.
to
Yes.
not skip the steps, as you
Yeah,
say in your lesson,
exactly.
David,
Yeah.
because then all of a sudden we're putting ourselves into a situation where we may not be speaking from our own experience so much, and we're
Right.
just trying to get likes, we're trying to get follows, our
Right.
intentions may not come from the right place.
Yes.
And there's also a lot of people, it's hard out there right now. Financially, people are being squeezed, and we
Yes.
have to look at
Yes.
that. Like, why are we being squeezed? This whole
I know.
system is so predatory. But what it's doing is now
So
everyone's like these
predatory.
abundance coaches and like live your best
Right.
life, live six
Right.
figures. And it's like, really, is that what spirituality is about?
And
Like,
they're
just
making their money not by actually showing how to do it, but selling you on the idea that they might be able to show you how to do it. So it's like it's a complete it's almost like blasphemy if you think of it from a theological perspective. It's
yeah,
from a personal trainer perspective, it's like me, you know, not even being able to do the splits, but trying to tell you about mobility, for example. And not to say that you have to be able viscerally to demonstrate. I mean, the Grand Master doesn't demonstrate anything. His students demonstrate because as we age, we have to respect. But there, you can rest assured, guarantee, maybe there isn't a video of it because, you know what I mean? There wasn't videos at the time, but that Grand Master had achieved those degrees of mastery, physically, viscerally. So therefore, we can trust that their pedagogical, you know what I mean, like influence
yeah,
is trustworthy. Everything else, it's like, man, like, all right, so to know Bruce Lee said is not enough. We must apply, and that's been said many ways by many people over the past course of I don't know human DNA history. You know what I mean? Like, because it's just what do they call it? It's perennial. It's just wisdom that will never go away, no matter what the age, what the technology exposure. It's so true. Being and knowing, yeah, very, very, very big difference, man. And I realized it when Karen Cove, actually from the Yoga Sanctuary, she was doing the 108 Sun Salutation fundraiser that we'd go to every uh, New Year's Day. Karen
beautiful.
Cove had said to me, "You cannot own the result, Nico, only the action." And
Mhm.
as one now today who still can bust a backflip, walk on my hands down the road, I know it's a lot harder than normal, and therefore I know what she means. It's like I can't just be like, yo, I can backflip. I better just go do the backflip and make sure I practice so that I continue to access that action because I can't own the result that I can backflip. I can't just say here I can backflip. I better do it because people are always wanting to see to believe. And hey, rightfully so. Not everyone has that Piscean imagination like Einstein who don't need to see it to believe it. They believe it and thus see it. And this is also
Mhm.
yourself. No, this is something probably you can relate to, right? Like the magician in you, and that's what a
Mhm.
not a good Gnostic student and teacher is one who he doesn't see it. He doesn't even need to see it because you can't physically see these things. You can only implement them and test them in life. And that's what yoga practice is for. We show up on our mat as a metaphor for how we're showing up on earth. And this is where I think people are lacking the practice and thus they don't have the access. You know what I mean? They claim they're tuned in, but it's like they're not even tuned within.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not to put people down or but like I did have the experience where, bro, I died. If it wasn't for my good brother Nick, who punched my chest because we were far out in the woods and there was gonna be no what are those things called when they shock you to get your heart
Yeah,
going?
defibrillators or
Defibrillator. That's
something.
it. There was
Yeah.
none of that. None of that. He punched
Damn.
me in the chest because, bro, he's like you stopped breathing. He was holding me. He's like,
Wow.
you were lifeless. So that was scary, and that's why, like, even just recently doing the journey was a big step into like courageously confronting that whatever
Yeah.
it was that I experienced. Because what I experienced, I'll tell you real quick. It was
Mhm.
like it started as a singularity, a point. This is when I started coming back online. Before I got there, where I ended up was this void, and I've heard them talk about this. that this is actually, it's not the white light. There's no light. There's apparently just this void. And that's what you want to like become. You know what I mean? You want to become part of the piece of just the nothingness, because it's just that, it's nothing. But what I felt was I was aware within this void, I was aware that I was there. And that was a problem, because not much like that scene in Superman where he's like trapped in this like kind of crystal. Remember, they get cast them out into space, into an oblivion. I was aware that I was there, and I was aware that I was there almost by punishment. Like I wasn't supposed to be there yet. And then I realized like there was no time here, and I didn't know how long I was going to be here. I knew I was trapped. And that was so horrifying, bro. What I don't know where and when. Maybe it's when he hit me and I maybe viscerally started to come back into consciousness, that what I saw was a single point, and that's where it all started. It came online, and this was told to me by a friend who's a major esoteric researcher. He said, "Oh, you went through," he said, what's called DNA genetic memory. Like, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you saw everything absolutely from nothing, from the singularity, evolve into all these multiple carbon-based life forms and stuff. Because that's what it was. It was like a single point. And then I noticed that point had a dot within it, which is the glyph of the sun, alchemically, right, in astrology. And then, which is a cell, single cell organism, an amoeba. And then that became, it opened up and became the Vesica Pisces, right? Which is essentially the first stage in if we think of the numerology and sacred geometry of it. And then through that Vesica Pisces, I recognized, oh, that's an eye. So that single cell is actually an eye. It's a conscience. Something's watching. And it started to like evolve, bro, like mitosis. And it became like, I went through Precambrian, like I went through all the different ages until I started recognizing through this eye, there was two eyes now. And then I saw quadruped, I saw then biped, then I started seeing recognizable ancestors, bro. And it was like, finally I started to reach the point where I was like, holy shit. And then I was like, I opened my eyes and I was like, my brother, you're my brother. There you are. And it wasn't my brother. My brother was
this
hours
ayahuasca?
away. This was mushrooms, 4, I think, or 5 grams. But he also had us eat it's called Syrian root. It's like a MAO inhibitor.
Oh, no.
Bro, and I fasted and I was dehydrated. I think what induced it was the dehydration. And that's what I learned after at South Lake Hospital when they did the tilt table test. They fainted me. They wanted to see what happens because and they did. They read my readings were like 8 seconds. My heart had stopped. Basically, I learned about hydration is the biggest issue with these plant medicines and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend who had a psychotic breakthrough on mushrooms. I mean, I was there when it happened. It was horrible. We had to call the police. And it was the same situation, wanting to do a heroic dose of 5 grams and adding the Syrian root, which is an MAO inhibitor. So it like doubles the powers of things.
Yeah.
I mean, that brother's an amazing guy, and he went through a real initiation with that. But, you know, he, like many of us in our 20s, he just had that like hunger to consume and become powerful by spirituality, you know, and that's where we need to be careful, and we need teachers, you know, at those stages in our life. And that's what, you know, I just want people to understand is like when you're just having your awakening, especially in your 20s, you know, before Saturn really deals with you, as you know, it's like your 20s is like, it's like your hunting and gathering phase. You know, you're going out, you're seeking experiences. You should be seeking guides, seeking elders. You are still so friggin' raw because you have not fully shaped your personality. You need to have life experiences to help you figure out who you really are. And you need to just take it slow. There's no rush. There's no need to posture oneself, to platform oneself, to call oneself this title, that title, because you're going to pigeonhole yourself for one. And you're also usually speaking from theory, not from experience.
Right.
And humility is a huge part of the path. I had incredible teachers, and the best teachers are the ones that are going to kick your ass. You know, I had one Chinese medicine mentor who was like my last major teacher, really. And I mean, he beheaded our egos. Like this guy was ruthlessly discerning, especially of spiritual ego, which is a huge problem and something people don't know a lot about. And I used to teach workshops on that. I've been feeling called to bring it through again. Again, the guys who wrote King, War, Magician, Lover, Robert Moore, the Jungian analyst, he wrote a whole book called Facing the Dragon. It's all about spiritual grandiosity. And it's a very important book for us all to read, because I do feel part of the agenda that's happening right now is that through social media, everyone's getting so self-interested in their platform, in their vocation, in their work,
Right.
that they're losing sight that we still need to build community and unity somehow.
Yes. Yes.
We still need to
Exactly.
find ways to come together, and to not be so distracted as well, because to me, the most basic practice is presence, is that
Totally.
beingness. And that's when you get in
Totally.
touch with the divine mind, that intelligence, the guiding realm, as the Taoists call it. And I
Right.
mean,
The
I'm saying
first
this for
principle,
myself now too.
mentalism.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Because this phone just perpetually takes us out of that
Yes.
attention
Yes.
span. That's the
It
first
does.
principle in hermetics.
It is mentalism. The first principle is mentalism. That all is mind. All is one divine
Mm,
intelligence. We're just
mm,
neurons firing, and
mm,
we're all like looking at each other like mirrors, loving and hating that which in others merely only reminds and reflects that which we hate and love in ourselves. So
mm.
that's the first principle. And for through FitHop, when I'm always teaching like, and not just fitness, I always talk about not just fit. I'm like spiritually equipped with the knowledge of
Right.
the gift that we all have within the divine feminine principle. And I'm like, I break it
Mm,
all down in rhythm and rhyme. And that's why it works every time because it speaks to the subconscious mind. But I'm always using the concept and context of music because verse, it's right there in the word. One, song. Verse is Latin for song. And thus, with
mm.
that, then I bring this up. This little piece of technology, which you've probably seen. Obviously, you guys performed with it. You and Buck were rocking it
Um,
at
I don't have. I used to have one of those. I sold mine unfortunately years back. I
oh
want to get another one though.
yeah, there's a newer one now actually.
I heard the
Peter,
newer one's really complicated,
is it?
or more, or I don't know. I heard it's more
Perhaps,
complicated.
perhaps. I mean, I'm sure it's
Who
got. That's
knows?
the thing. What with more features also comes more options. It becomes more. It's not always a good thing, especially in
Yeah,
music when you already have so many different options. It's too
totally.
many. Too many moving parts can get a little bit. Yeah. But with this one piece of technology, what it allows me to do is using nothing more than the voice, which is another thing I want to talk more. And I think that's when I see you in the studio. We can actually play a little bit even. I've got a
Ooh,
microphone here. I want to just show you. It was gifted
love
to
it.
me by a Pisces, actually. That right there
Oh,
is like a, I don't know, man. Like, I don't even want to give the number on this because this is going to be public, but that is a very, very expensive microphone. I'd never
what's
buy
it?
that
What's it
microphone.
called? What
It's a
model?
Bronner VM1,
Okay,
and it's got its own power source here, and it's
beautiful.
a multiple polar pattern that we can like change and play with cardioid versus supercardioid, hypercardioid, omnidirectionality. You know what I mean? And what
Nice.
I want to do with you, because bro, that's another thing. Even with Julia, my fiance, when we came and we
Mm.
saw you last at the Halloween event there at in Toronto, the Chocolate Groove event, that's
Yeah.
where she heard your voice. And it's like, I've talked about this. There's something I
Mm,
feel we all come equipped with called voice
mhm,
recognition. If
mm,
the eyes are the windows of the soul, the Sufi, I think, said this, the voice is the
mm,
soul. And therefore, when you hear
mm,
someone's voice, you know, either like you're repelled or you're attracted. You know what I mean? There's
mhm,
resonance, right? She heard your voice and
mhm.
she was like, yo, whoever that was, that dude's legit. I'm like, yeah, that's Darren. I'm like,
Well, that's
we're gonna
cool.
get him on the podcast. I promise you. You were really busy at the time. I came to see you and say what's up, and I know you acknowledged me. You're like, yeah, Nico, but like you were like in the midst and thick of it, you know.
Oh
So I was like,
yeah,
fair enough. I'm
events are
like,
tough, as you know.
I know it was a yeah. So that's why I was just like, all in divine due time. I always trust in that. I mean, for me, my life is nothing but testament of timing. That's it. Everything else, as a
Absolutely.
drummer, especially, we know like you could go like this all you want, but it's timing that makes it a groove, you know. And
Yeah,
and that's the
word, brother.
principle of rhythm in the I think it's the fourth principle in the Hermetic uh
I gotta get
Tristic.
back to the hermetics, man. It's
Oh, now
inspiring.
that you're in Greece, absolutely, bro. And being a Gemini, Hermes represents the god we call Hermes Trismegistos is where we get Hermetic. It's
Uh-huh.
Mercury. We're talking about Mercury,
No
and Mercury
way.
is Gemini's ruler. Gemini is the
Wow.
masculine expression of Mercury, and Virgo is it's feminine, which is interesting because your Virgo, your North Node is Virgo, and then your Sun
Yeah.
is Mercury, is Gemini. So
Yeah.
you're very Mercurian, bro. And
Yeah.
Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun, which is why it says they depict him as the guy with the wing on his feet, who
Yes. I mean, I always say that about Geminis. We're
super
always like
swift.
running up to the divine with our winged shoes and then running
Yes.
back down to give
So swift.
messages.
It's like Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, but like sometimes too quick, he gets burnt by the damn candlestick.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
So it's like being really like
Absolutely.
slowing down and doing that opposite energy of Gemini, which is Sag, and becoming like that. that dart.
Ah,
That's your
that's
that's
why I've
your
been taking
opposite.
a lot more sabbaticals. That's been a huge piece for me in writing these books because I do feel, when you get into your 40s, like I'm turning 45 next Tuesday, and like
Oh wow,
you
that's
start
right.
to
You're
you
79, like my brother.
yeah, man.
1979.
And
Yeah.
you get into your 40s, I find that's when you first really start to feel mastery.
Mm.
Because you've been doing something at this point, like Saturn when you were 30 really helped you on your dharmic, your vocation path.
Yes.
And when
Yes.
you're in your 40s, you've been doing your thing, whatever you're gifted at, for at least a decade in a very strong way,
Yes. Yes.
maybe longer. And in your 40s, it becomes this effortless thing. It's just
Yes.
channeling out of you. And you've also
Yes.
gathered a lot on your tree of life, and like I feel right now I have so much like knowledge and experiences I've absorbed that I just want to hermit a lot more. And and
Mm.
and so that's been my dance of like actually like getting all these messages and revelations, but now I'm trying to like really root and spend a bit more time away from all the action. Like this year, I usually go on tour in the summer in Europe. I'm
Right.
being mercurial and wandering all over the place and having all these transformational experiences, but I'm like, I really need to like sit and just
Yes.
allow all this to
Yes.
accumulate and to ripen.
To ripe it,
Through
to write it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Think
yeah.
about
And
that,
and
right?
the books, yeah.
Yes, because that's the thing about the masculine and feminine expression of this planet Mercury, right? Of what we would call the messenger of the
Mm-hmm,
zodiac of the planets.
mm-hmm,
It's Gemini is the conversation. It's like it's the oration of the information. Virgo, the feminine aspect of it, is now the grounding it into the compartmentalization, which is very much what's happening when we're writing. It's
mm-hmm,
taking a lot of organization now, chapters and headings and paragraphs. Like you bring in structure, but ultimately it's all Mercury. And it's interesting that you find yourself with a North Node in Virgo, though you're a
mm-hmm.
Gemini. So it's like you're
That's
doing that
interesting.
work. And Virgo, if you remember in the tarot, is the Hermit card. So Virgo knows that in
Oh, no
order to
way.
be productive, it must become hermitize itself, and
Damn.
hence
I gotta
hermetic.
remember these things. That's some
Her,
dope wisdom you're dropping for me,
yeah,
bro.
yeah. I'll share the link with you after as well. I'm gonna edit this
Okay.
up, and yeah,
Yeah,
this has
yeah,
been
yeah, yeah.
such a pleasure, bro. I'm thinking. I
No doubt.
wanna unpack so much more with you, but I do because it's
We'll do
Father's
it
Day,
in
and I just
person, man.
realized we will
Oh
in
yeah,
person.
shit. You
Yeah,
go
yeah.
enjoy your Father's Day, man.
Thank you, brother. I still wanted to honor this time slot though, man, because like you're special, bro. And when I got that email that you had locked in, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be great. I told Julia, she's like, oh yeah, oh Darren, yeah, because she remembers you from your voice recognition,
Oh,
right?
word, man.
So she was like, yeah, babe, do that, man, do that
Oh,
podcast,
well,
because she
tell her I say hi, man. And like,
will
yeah,
do.
just so great to chat with you, brother. I really
Yes,
enjoy your vibe, your
thank
wisdom,
you,
and
brother.
let's do it when I get back to Canada, man. I'll
You
be in
bet.
touch. And
You said
yeah, it'd
the
be
the
great to
second
hang
half
out.
of July. That's my birthday, July 28th. So it's
Ooh,
amazing. I might even do a little like some type of like a maybe I don't know, maybe a
if you
musical
do a
kind of.
gathering, let me know, man. I'd love to come
Definitely a
hang out with
gathering.
you.
I'm just thinking if I release something last year, I released my album Uncaged on my birthday.
Oh,
And I'll send you that as well. I don't know if you heard the
please.
album. It's quite the
Mhm.
eclectic piece, man. A decade in the making, bro.
Ooh, yeah, send
Holy
it to me. I'd love
smokes.
to hear it, brother.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely something musical. It'll be a gathering and it'll be musical. We got a nice little fire pit here. We're right by the water, and that'll be perfect timing, man, for sure. I'll send your
Excellent,
regards
brother.
and thank you, brother. Send my regards and love to Mother Greece, man. It's so amazing that
I
you're
will,
there.
bro. I'm going to the Apollo Temple tomorrow.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
in Corfu
Okay.
Island, man.
Take
Corfu.
a
You got to
oh
check out
my
Corfu. It's
God.
amazing. Yeah.
Take a deep breath. Just ground it in, anchor it in for me, man.
Yeah.
Apollo, the sun god.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
brother.
Thanks again for
All right,
coming and
man.
taking this interview, brother. To be continued, my
Thank
man.
you. Much love, brother. Enjoy
All right,
Father's
Darren.
Day.
Thank you, brother.
See
You
you,
bet.
brother.